In the fall of 2007, I found myself in the small, forgotten town of Greystone, located in the backwoods of New England. I had just finished a long drive for work, and after hours of winding roads, I was desperate for a place to rest. My GPS led me to an old hotel that I had never heard of, the Wyndham Hotel. The Wyndham was an imposing structure, built in the early 1900s, its brick facade covered with ivy, giving it an ancient, almost Gothic feel. It had an air of neglect, with chipped paint on the windows and a once grand sign that hung crookedly above the entrance. There was no one in the parking lot, except for one rusty old car parked in the back. Despite its dilapidation, I didn't care much at the time. It was late, I was tired, and I needed a place to stay for the night. The inside of the hotel was just as old as the outside, with creaky floorboards and a musty smell hanging in the air. The front desk clerk was an elderly woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her voice was soft, but welcoming as she handed me the key to room 307. "Enjoy your stay," she said with a peculiar smile. Her eyes lingered on me a little too long, but I didn't think much of it. As I made my way to the room, I noticed the hallways were eerily silent. The faint hum of the overhead lights was the only sound that accompanied my footsteps. The walls were covered with faded wallpaper, yellowing with age. There was something about the place that felt wrong, but I pushed the thought aside. I had stayed in old hotels before. They often had that unsettling atmosphere. Room 307 was tucked away in a corner at the end of the hall. The key slid easily into the lock and I stepped inside. The room was small, with a single bed in the center, a wardrobe that looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and a window overlooking the empty parking lot. The room felt colder than it should have been for the season. I unpacked my things and tried to relax, but my mind kept wandering back to the strange feeling I had walking through the hotel. It felt as if the place was watching me, as if something was lingering in the corners, waiting. I shook it off and decided to take a hot shower to calm myself down. As I stepped into the bathroom, the overhead light flickered once, then twice, before going out entirely. I tried to turn it back on, but it remained dark. Growing frustrated, I reached for the light switch again when I noticed something strange. A dark stain on the ceiling, like the remnants of something old and forgotten. It wasn't much, but it gave me an unsettling feeling. I hastily showered, still unnerved, and wrapped myself in a towel. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching sound. It started as a faint rustling coming from somewhere in the wall, but then it grew louder, more frantic. It was as if something or someone was desperately trying to claw its way through the plaster. My heart began to race and I rushed to get dressed, my mind reeling with possibilities. Could it be rodents? Maybe an old pipe or air duct making strange noises. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't ignore the gnawing fear that had settled in my chest. I decided to leave the room and take a walk outside to calm my nerves. When I stepped into the hallway, something was different. It was colder. The air felt thicker. The once faint hum of the lights had grown louder, almost deafening. I started walking towards the stairwell to exit the hotel when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate steps. I turned, expecting to see another guest or staff member, but the hallway was empty. There was no one around. I quickly descended the stairs, eager to leave the hotel for a moment of normalcy. When I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt my breathing slow. The quiet of the night helped ease the tension in my chest, but the feeling of being watched never left me. I spent about 20 minutes walking around the block, but as I was making my way back to the hotel, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The rusty car in the back parking lot was gone. I hadn't seen anyone come or go, but now the car was nowhere to be found. My mind raced and I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, but something felt off, like a weight pressing against my chest. Reluctantly, I returned to the Wyndham. The lobby was still eerily silent and the old woman at the front desk was gone. I made my way back up to my room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the door to 307, I felt a sudden chill sweep over me. The air had grown colder, more oppressive. I opened the door, and the room was exactly as I had left it. Except, the bed was not made. The sheets were thrown across the room, as if someone had tossed them aside in a hurry. My belongings, which I had neatly organized before I left, were now scattered across the floor, but it was the mirror that made my blood run cold. It had fogged up from the inside, the condensation forming an image. The outline of a woman's face stared back at me, her hollow eyes peering through the glass. I blinked hard, but when I looked again, the face was gone. The mirror was clear, and there was no sign of any condensation. My mind raced. Was I imagining things? Had I been up too long? Exhausted from the drive? I grabbed my phone to call the front desk, but before I could press the button, the lights flickered again. Then a knock at the door. I froze. Slowly, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. There was no one there. I waited for several minutes, heart racing, but when nothing happened, I opened the door cautiously. The hallway was empty, but there was something new. Blood. The floor was smeared with fresh blood, leading from the door to the end of the hallway. I couldn't think straight. I tried to retreat back into my room, but as I did, I saw something, or rather, someone, in the hallway. A woman, dressed in tattered clothes with wild, unkempt hair and eyes that were hollow, staring directly at me. My throat closed. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The woman didn't move. She just stood there watching. I slammed the door shut and locked it, panic rising in my chest. I backed away from the door and collapsed onto the bed, trembling uncontrollably. I had no idea what I had just seen, but I couldn't deny it anymore. The Wyndham Hotel was not just old, it was cursed. Around midnight, I heard it again. The scratching sound from the wall, louder now, almost desperate. The air grew thick with an unexplainable presence, and the room began to feel smaller, the walls closing in around me. Suddenly, the lights went out completely. In the pitch-black room, I heard the unmistakable sound of breathing, raspy, labored, coming from the corner. I felt the cold breath on the back of my neck. A whisper, faint but clear, cut through the darkness. "You shouldn't have come here." As the chilling presence crept closer, the oppressive air in the room suffocated me. My heart pounded against my chest, the desperation clawing at my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything around me felt surreal, like the walls were closing in and the shadows were alive. Then, without warning, the world went black. I woke up to the harsh, sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft beeping of machines. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. My body felt heavy, like I had been drugged, and my mind was a fog of confusion. I tried to sit up, but the dizziness washed over me and I collapsed back onto the bed. A nurse entered the room, a young woman with short brown hair and a calm smile. She looked at me as if I had been asleep for days. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice soothing. "You've had a rough time, Mr. Taylor. You've been in and out of consciousness for the past 24 hours. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my mind. What happened? Where am I?" "You were found unconscious in your car about a mile outside of Greystone. You had a panic attack and passed out. You've been in the ER ever since. A passerby saw you and called for help. We think the stress of the long drive and other factors may have contributed to your condition," she explained. I shook my head, trying to piece everything together. No, that's not right. I was in a hotel, the Wyndham Hotel. I saw things. I heard things. There was someone there, a woman. The nurse held up a hand, cutting me off. "Mr. Taylor, we ran a few tests when you were brought in. Everything is perfectly normal physically, but the hallucinations, well, they are likely a result of extreme stress, exhaustion, and anxiety. Your mind was overwhelmed. You were hallucinating." I stared at her, my heart pounding once more, but this time from disbelief. Hallucinations? I wasn't hallucinating. I saw her. The woman, the blood on the floor. The whispers, the scratching, it was all real. She gave me a pitying look, but her expression was kind. I understand that it feels real to you, but these things happen. Sometimes when we're under extreme stress, our brains create things that aren't really there. You had a very vivid and frightening experience, but it wasn't real, Mr. Taylor. I wanted to scream at her, to demand that she believe me, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was a blur. I thought about everything I had seen, everything I had heard, and still, a part of me, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, refused to believe what she was telling me. No, I couldn't just accept that. I couldn't just let it go.